This isn't my sleep paralysis demon. It was my brother's first. Part 1. Another day off was welcome, another day to plan my next night. I sifted through my phone, looking for any articles I could find on sleep paralysis and ways to deter it. Most of the info was obvious but useless: form a consistent sleep schedule, reduce stress, avoid drugs and alcohol, keep a nightlight on for mental comfort, etc. There were always mentions of medication or to seek medical help if needed, all of which I knew I would be too soon to seek. No doctor would prescribe something to a guy who had only suffered 2 nights of this. Noon came along, nothing hopeful. My task shifted to memory recovery. I scrolled through my phone's photos, hoping to recall faces and the names attached to them. Locations, vacations, work-related trips, anything to pull my recollection out of the bog. I wrote all my contact info onto a separate piece of paper, forcing myself to connect a name and number to whoever's face I would slide to. I managed to pair up a couple people with their names, even remembered a friend's giving party, thanks to a very unflattering picture of me passed out on a couch, with my college friends writing "sucks" at Mario Kart on my face. Actually, dorks and very innocent compared to what I would have written. Then I came across a picture of my mom and dad, sitting in the living room holding up what must have been a Christmas present from me. It was a box of clay coins I had made in the backyard with our abundant supply of red clay and rain. My parents looked way too young. It took me a second to realize this photo wasn't taken with a phone. This was a download from a digital camera. A picture I treasured enough to keep all these years. It was our first Christmas without Dan. Like Pandora's box, a flood of childhood memories burst through my head all at once. The trip. The accident. Why I wasn't there. I had been sick. It was Easter Sunday. My parents were still practicing Catholics. They insisted we go to church for Mass that morning, and I had woken up with the flu and fought tooth and nail to stay in bed. They capitulated. My brother wasn't so lucky, and now he had to go to church without me for entertainment. He lied and fought to stay home with me, saying he was sick too. But my parents saw through his act and took him along. I gave him a wave goodbye from my bedroom window as he got in the car with a tear-stained face. That was the last time I saw him. He was 7. I stared at that Christmas photo, into the sunken, tired eyes of my parents, who desperately patched on smiles for the picture I certainly must have taken. I'm sure they blamed themselves for Dan's death. I wouldn't know, though. They remained stoic on the topic for the rest of my formative years. Another thought hit me with a sense of déjà vu that rocked me. I should have been with him. I wasn't sick with the flu. I was, at best, suffering from allergies. But I knew how to play it up. I was 10. I was much more sophisticated in the bullshitting department. A guilt bore into my stomach with a familiarity that confirmed that I had suffered from this feeling long before now. A guilt that I had carried and momentarily forgotten. The rest of the afternoon was a blur, weighed down by an unease that rattled me. All this information being revealed and connected as I pursued a resolution for my sleep paralysis felt too coincidental. More. I needed to recall more of my time with Dan. I knew he had to have confided in me, things he would never tell Mom and Dad. Surely, there was something I had forgotten from that period. We shared the same bedroom. There is no way I never once witnessed one of his episodes. Hopping on my laptop, I dug through the archive of years-old photos I had. Family photos from over a decade ago, downloaded and saved for this niche utility I never thought would be required. One more, just one more memory-jogging image was all I wanted. Another memory out of the bog. A single picture popped up of me and Dan dressed for Halloween. He was Spider-Man, and I was the Green Goblin. The flash of the camera revealed us posing in our bedroom, which was a cluttered mess of costumes sprawled over a field of Legos coating the carpet. That bedroom, its bunk bed pressed into the corner, next to the closet doors. The switch I was blindly searching for had been flicked. A distinct memory projected to the forefront of my mind. It was a week before the accident. I woke up on the top bunk to the sound of my brother whimpering below me. Another restless night, and I was annoyed to be losing sleep because of it. Like a selfish kid, I tried ignoring it and putting my pillow over my head, I hated having to save him every night. I resented being the watchman for his episodes, and it was almost every night. Drifting back into the opium of sleep, I snuffed out Dan's noise. Then the bed began to shake. Frustrated, I tore off my sheets and looked below to witness my brother jolting his body limply, tears streaking down his cheeks as a scream choked him, unable to escape his throat. This was a bad one. I jumped from the top bunk and embraced Dan, chanting reassurances, all things my mom taught me to do when my little brother suffered particularly bad nights. This eased the shaking, but the whimpering continued. I turned to him, expecting him to be fully awake again. I saw him staring, eyes wide and red, unblinking at the corner of the room just at the foot of our bed. Dan, hyperventilating, rustled to life as I gave him another hug and moved his head. With a gasp, his arms came to life and wrapped around me as he shook, sobbing, into my shoulder. This must have been the first time I acted like a real big brother, because I recall being deeply shaken by my little brother's distress. That emotional singe bore into me, and I found myself genuinely wanting to comfort him, something I was too selfish to care about before. I hugged him back, promising to let him play any of my Game Boy games he wanted in the morning. With the shaking ceasing, indicating I was helping, I continued bargaining with promises of comic books, Game Boy time, and even dibs on the GameCube next time he wanted to play ahead of me. He finally mellowed out, his whimpering easing to a hiccup. I never noticed how small he was until then. He said he wants to trade places with me. My brother's muffled voice eked out from my shoulder. I remember clearly again. I then went to get Mom, assuming he had just had an especially bad nightmare. The rest of that night remains a blur. Dan's tear-stained face is the only thing I recall vividly from the remainder of the early morning. Night terrors, passed up from my little brother to me. A pattern. Something to steady myself with, even if daunting in its strange implications. I rattled my brain trying to remember more of Dan's episodes, what he said he saw, when they were worse than others, anything that could clue me in on if this was some odd family disease I had awoken after the accident. I glanced out my window to be greeted by a full moon, beaming into my living room. I turned to my clock. 10:13 p.m. I made a pot of coffee. A desire to avoid the inevitable sleepless night to come was all I could cling to. Cup after cup. A chemical cocktail of caffeine and dread to fuel my listless scanning of blurry recollections. Inevitably, my brain would return its fixation onto what Dan said. He said he wants to trade places with me. A shiver ran through me. I can't imagine how horrible his episode must have been compared to mine, at such a young age. Another thought was triggered from this contemplation. Did he ever describe what he saw? Sitting on my couch, I stared ahead, churning my mind, as the clock ticked past 3 WLAM. No work tomorrow. This was the last thought I had as I nodded off in the dimly lit living room. The single lamp in the corner watched over me, its soft light cascading sharp, large shadows across the room. My eyes shot open, dry and wide. The clock sat on the wall, reading 5:12 a.m. Sitting upright still, I attempted to get off the couch, only to discover the nightmare was happening again. Limp arms lay worthlessly at my sides as I sat, heart racing, waiting for the clock to reassure me that this too would pass. The lamp's once calming light was now a fiend, desecrating the room's corners with shadowy vestiges for the unknown terrors I anticipated. There was no hiding. Directly in front of me, looming next to the TV, stood the surreal specter I had hoped to avoid tonight. The tower of shadow reached the ceiling, its head bent to fit in the room. Its face, a spiraling whirlpool of random eyes, was its only feature revealed from the lamp's dim illumination. Bending its torso in inhuman flexibility, it lowered its head toward me. My stifled whimpering tremored to my living corpse as I gazed into unblinking eyes, which now hovered directly over me. Breath locked in my lungs, I choked in the familiar helplessness, waiting for the clock to ring in my freedom. Its vertical maw opened breathlessly, revealing the cave of fangs and teeth. In that ethereal multiplicity of voices, it said, "I know you. Can we trade places now?" Ice filled my heart. The The familiar phrase lingered in the air like a smog. I couldn't answer. It stood over me all the while, peering into my bloodshot eyes for a response I was incapable of uttering. Despite my involuntary silence, my mind was ringing during the long silence. It knew my brother, it knew my brother, it knew my brother. A fiend, a presence I could not have anticipated, had encroached on me while I regained my memories. Sitting there paralyzed, I wallowed in fear as I gazed at a family visitor I had either forgotten or removed from my mind purposefully. Numerous eyes stared back at mine as they welled up with a deep sorrow for my little brother, a sympathetic sorrow I had never felt before. It left as abruptly as it came, leaving me alone in a lingering coat of sweat. Breathing heavily, I remained sitting, my thoughts locked on what had just occurred. The coincidence was too much, the phrase too precise. I needed to remember what Dan saw. I had to know if these were the same events he suffered from before his accident. The pattern was too similar, and the end results too horrible to consider.